Hey folks, Brian Bledsoe with you here once again, host of the Desert Farmer Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. Hope you are doing well. It's hard to believe as I sit here and record this is August 13th, wrapping up August 13th, actually. August to me always seems to go very quickly. July, drags on, especially if the weather sucks. And then you get into August. Even if the weather sucks, the month seems to go a little bit faster. And boy, we are certainly dealing with a lot of suckage as far as the weather is concerned. Some folks getting some help, don't get me wrong, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. Shout out to Guy Brockman, Lubbock, Texas today. Shout out to Red Raiders too. But shout out to Guy. He sent me a text a little bit ago. It's 104 in Lubbock. Picked up about 6/10 of an inch of rain. Boom, just like that. Dropped from 104 to 76. Getting a little bit of rain right there. Look, I know that none of that is perfection. A lot of stuff is already, completely burnt up and ruined. But you know what? We've got to start somewhere and go into fixing this thing for a wide area. We still have a ways to go before we can even entertain starting to fix this wreck for certain parts of the region. I'm going to talk more about that. But when you're going through a tough time, you always look for just the little things that can help you get through the day and at least add a little bit of sunshine, so to speak, to your day. And just a little thing with me, look, I spent 28 years in television. And, most of those years were good. There were a handful of years, especially toward the end, that really sucked for a whole host of reasons. That's one of the reasons why I departed, and it was a big one. But every day I get to sit down and do what I love, which is give you folks a look at weather, whether it's here on the Desert Farmer podcast, or if it's on Twitter or my Facebook pages, or if it's with some of my individual clients. I do my best every day to bring that to you so you have that material. And for me, I get to work right here in my home office. One of the little things, and this may sound really stupid, it's something that I look forward to every single day. One of my vices is Mountain Dew. How stupid is that, right? I love Mountain Dew. I love rolling the 7-Eleven, getting a Mountain Dew, getting a big gulp, coming back here, doing my thing for you guys day in, day out. But it's that little simple thing, just getting in my truck, driving to the 7-Eleven and grabbing a Mountain Dew. It's just a little bit of, brings a little bit of levity to the situation where, at our ranch in Eastern Colorado, there are places where it looks like, surface of Mars. Okay. We've had less than 3 inches of rain. A lot of you know this already. Less than 3 inches of rain so far for this year. But here every day in a professional setting in my line of work, I have to kind of separate that skepticism and pessimism for the weather pattern that we're dealing with right now and buckle up and give you guys the overall outlook. And look, I know a lot of you guys don't consume weather information anymore. You're going to have to, come back to that at some point. I know you're pissed off the weather pattern. You're pissed off the weather guys. It doesn't matter. All right. And I always tell you, you got something to say. Here's a medium to say it right here on YouTube with the Desert Farmer Podcast. You want to throw smoke? I'll take your smoke. Let's have a conversation about this kind of thing. And it's something that I really enjoy doing, whether it's in this medium or if it's on social media. And I see all the comments. I see people throwing shade. It's okay. I get it. It is what it is. But I will say this, okay? And before we get started today, I really want this point to resonate that if you have written off any potential pattern change that could possibly happen from what we've seen, I think that is a big mistake. The reason I say that is because this pattern, for better or for worse, wherever you've been, is really all about extremes. And while some areas have been receiving the dry and the hot extreme of this, other areas have not. There were places in Indiana yesterday picked up 17 inches of rain. All right. You might say, oh, I know that's the Corn Belt or whatever. Hey, you know what? It doesn't matter where it is. The atmosphere right now and going forward is a loaded gun. And for some areas, we are going to see that flip going forward, whether it is excessive rainfall or an excessive snowfall event as we move forward. We are going to have to be ready for these extremes going forward because the deck is stacked in that favor with this powerful El Nino. And hey, I get it. You've heard enough of the El Nino bullshit, right? Or El Busto or whatever you want to call it. I get it. All right. It doesn't change the fact that it is still present and going to be a significant player in the weather patterns, not just in the United States or the Central Plains or the Western Plains or the Southern Plains or the West Coast or whatever, but globally. It's going to continue to have an impact. This event is here, it's been here, and it's not going away anytime soon. So just kind of laying a little bit of the groundwork here. All right. Uh, One little bit of thing for me next week. All right, I'm going to go to Kansas City and help out Farm Journal with the Pro Farmer Crop Tour. First thing for me, going to be in studio there in Kansas City, working with some great people, delivering you some weather information. I'm pretty excited about it. I know a lot of you guys think the whole tour sucks and it's not a thing that you ever want to even look at. I see you make fun of it all the time, and some of you just outright hate it. I totally understand. All right, that's your opinion, but it's an opportunity for me and a great opportunity for me, and I'm humbled to be a part of it to get a little bit more exposure a little bit farther east versus out here in the west in the southwest high plains. So I'm excited about it. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk some weather. All right, let's buckle down, get going here. The rundown of what this Desert Farmer podcast is going to be about. We're going to talk about the past 180, 90, 60, 30-day period. We're going to talk about what the next 2 weeks has in store. I'm going to then dive into ENSO analysis and look at the MEI. What the hell is the MEI, you might ask? It's the multivariate ENSO index. It measures how well the ocean and the atmosphere are coupled and are working together. Then we're going to delve into the seasonal forecast model update. Are there any possible failure modes for this ENSO event as we get deeper into late this year and as we go into early 27? What's up with the AQM and the PDO? Going to talk about that. And lastly, are there any analog years that are going to be valid for this event? Or are we just simply flying blind for this event? And some of you might say, hey, what the hell? You've been flying blind with this event for a while. Hey, I get it. It doesn't diminish the fact that we continue to have to look at this and see how things are going to go as we move forward throughout this forecast. All right. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and get down to it. The past 180 days, we're looking at precipitation anomalies as a percent of normal. Some of these are pretty awful, especially through that sector. All right. Guyman, Oklahoma, right there, that's 36% of average over the past 6 months. And you might say, that's way too high. All right. Keep in mind, there were some rain events that sneak in there that are measured, but some of you may think it's too high. Some of you may think this map is too smooth. I don't like using the drought monitor to look at this stuff because to me, the drought monitor changes way too slow than what people are actually witnessing. I'm not trying to throw the drought monitor folks under the bus. It's just a thing that I think. All right. It's something I believe because I've been seeing it for a long time. That's a 38% of average in Amarillo, Texas, 44 in Dalhart, 49 there in Springfield. Truly, the Dust Bowl region has stunk over the past 6 months with this. Meanwhile, down in this part of Texas, we've been doing okay. Now, one of the big events that happened, I believe it was probably 3 weeks ago or so ish, delivered so much water down here in this country, a lot of flooding, in some cases, 10 to 30 inches of rain. We've also struggled mightily out here, all right, across the western slope of Colorado, Utah, whatever. And if you look at this, just taking the past 6 months through here, you might say, hey, no problems. I don't really think this tells the whole story, though, back here. A lot of this has really come to fruition over the past, few months or so. If we look at the past 90 days, all right, this part of the region in that 90-day period, okay, did pretty well. So did this part of the region. In between, not so much. Again, that's a 48% of average there in Amarillo, 43 over the past 3 months there in Guyman. What about the past 60 days? Well, that's Scott City, Kansas right there. 213% of average over the past 60 days. Meanwhile, Okay. Meanwhile, you go just to the west in Leota, Kansas, 78%. I was looking at Kokorach just the other day, and Leota, Kansas, since May 10th, has had about 4.8 inches of rain. Scott City, since that time frame, has had 14. You go farther east to Dighton, they've had 18 inches. All right, pretty remarkable. And then you get this crap that shows up just east of there. Very extreme. Even if you come south here, look at this. Okay, terrible. But that stretch here did very well. Colby, Oakley, right down to Scott City, right there. That's Akron, Colorado, right there. 231% of average for that 60-day period. Pretty wild stuff. Dalhart, meanwhile, 21% of average. Pitiful in places. What about the past 30 days? Well, the past 30 days have even been worse. Pampa, Dumas, Amarillo, Dalhart, Guyman, over here toward Perryton, Texas. We're talking anywhere from 0 to about 10% of average for that 30-day period. And it has been hot. You don't need me to tell you that it's been hot. Okay. But if we look at areas farther northeast, this area has been awful too across parts of Kansas. Over the top, this whole area has struggled over the past 30 days. Okay. So there have been, but by the same token, look at this. Okay. All the way through here, parts of the Corn Belt, and even back here into parts of the Northwest High Plains have done okay. And that 300% of average over here in parts of Indiana, that takes into account what we've seen recently. The monsoon has not been a complete bust, but it hasn't favored certain areas like it otherwise would have. All right. So will that change? Yes. I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to get some help. But man, this dryness is one thing, but the dryness in combination with days on end that are 100 to 105 degrees have just simply made things awful. A lot of crops burnt up, even irrigated crops didn't pollinate. From a corn standpoint, in some places, it's been rough, no question. So that begs the question: what's going on over the next couple of weeks? So let's look at that. This is the European ensemble. All right, so this would be from tomorrow, the 14th, through the 21st. These are the temperature anomalies obviously going to be associated with that. Anywhere along and south of that line, and especially in this sector, in my opinion, okay, that's going to be ground zero for continued heat. Up here to the northwest over the next 7 days, we're going to continue to keep things cooler than average. All right. What about precipitation anomalies? Well, again, anything pretty much during that 7 day period that's along and south of that line, you're going to get skunked for the most part. But up here to the north and northwest, you're going to do fairly well. Parts of eastern Colorado, parts of western Kansas. Hell, we might even get into the far northwest panhandles with some rain. And as I said, Lubbock today picked up, last time Guy was talking to me, over a half inch right there in Lubbock in quick fashion. So it's not to say that everybody's striking out down here where there have been a few storms, but certainly the farther northwest, north, and northeast you go, you're better off in terms of moisture. And we're continuing to bring these thunderstorm complexes through the Corn Belt too. What about the following 7 days after that, the 21st through the 28th? That heat really starts to flex again here. You thought the heat was over? Nope, it's not. It's not over. It's going to flex again in this area across southern Kansas, all of Oklahoma, especially northwest Texas. And that heat's going to continue to develop back up here to the northwest too. But the core of it is going to remain right in this general area right through the end of this month. Precipitation anomalies for that 7 day period, pretty much anywhere along and east of that line, not very good. We still get some monsoon pop coming like this, but for that 7 day period, we kind of wind things down a little bit as the ridge shifts its way back to the west a little bit. And some of these areas in the Corn Belt are going to need dried out. But if you remember what we had kind of talked about earlier this year, that I was really concerned about this quadrant, all right, for the possibility of flash drought. A lot of these areas, especially in East Texas, did very well early this year with rain. We had a lot of rain in parts of eastern Kansas too, and we've kind of shut that off. And I think we're going to continue to keep that shut off. And that 7 day period from the 21st to the 28th kind of goes a long way into keeping that drought talk going. Now, let's look at the European extended forecast here. This actually takes us from the 28th of August through the 27th of September. Look, I get what you're going to say when you see this map. Totally understand. You're going to say, this is nothing but Bullshit, right? Yeah, that's what you're saying. Totally understand the agricultural side of me that has to deal with this stuff would agree with you. The professional side of me as a meteorologist on the other side says, hold up for just a second. Hear me out. This model, when it initializes, if it's dry when it initializes every night, it carries that flavor of the forecast over for at least the following 2 weeks. All right. So there's something in the model that has to completely flip the script for it to go from where we are right now to all of this, wetter than average that's showing up here across West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, most of Colorado, a good chunk of Kansas, all the way up here into southern parts of Nebraska and into north central Missouri. What could perhaps be fueling this? All right. Well, I think that the monsoon pattern is going to continue to pump like this, especially after we get past this month. All right. And there may be still some tropical entities out here that inject more moisture this way. Either way you cut it, I don't care how it gets here. The model is indicating the potential for that to occur. I want to see it before I really believe it and sign off on it. But the fact that the model is doing that at least gives me a little bit of optimism that we might come out in September and do better. I'm not saying it could be good. I'm saying a lot better than where we've been, which to be honest, the bar's set pretty low. So it wouldn't have take a whole lot to get that accomplished. Now, temperature standpoint, this area here along that line and adjacent to it's probably going to be average to cooler than average. We're probably still going to be warmer than average here. That's not to say that we won't see some cooler air come in from time to time, but as a whole, the pattern is not necessarily stacked to bring a lot of cool air in, at least initially. All right. So, kind of what you see is what you get, at least for the time being. Let's move beyond that. Let's talk about the current state of the oceans and what's going on with our El Nino. Huge El Nino going on down here, teetering on the edge of record territory already. And this El Nino is going to continue to intensify as we wrap up this year, likely peaking November, December. I'll talk more about that in just a second. But something that I've noticed here lately, uh, there used to be more cool water showing up in that ring right here than what there has been. We obviously have the big warm pool that's out here in the Northwest Pacific, and the farther east you go, it's not as warm. Doesn't mean it's completely cold, it's just less warm. And when you have a real big positive pop like that in sea surface temperature anomalies here, and even just less warm territory over here, that's going to continue to give you that negative PDO look. Right? Address more about that later in the show. I already talked about that. But if we look at how things have transpired here over the past 15 days, we have warmed up this area quite a bit. All right. That's a 15-day temperature anomaly change that is notable. We've had a little cooler water show up here and also back here. So that cool water could be beating back some of this warm pool that's up here. All right. Some interesting changes that are taking place right there. The ENSO region has continued to either stay static or continue to warm. But if we strip that down to what it looks like against the global mean, if we take the normal sea surface temperature anomaly graphic I showed you first and compare it to what the global mean looks like, we still have that kind of coolish horseshoe, don't we? Yeah. That's still the negative PDO that's going on. Again, big warm pop right there. The farther east you get, less warm, and eventually cooler than average when stacked next to the global mean. All right. But this El Nino still stands out big time, even against the global mean. But that's what the oceans are doing. If we look at what's going on beneath the surface, all right, for those of you that don't know, think of this over here as Indonesia. Think of this over here as South America. This top rectangle is what's going on at the surface. Okay, just a little different way of looking at it. But down here is beneath the surface. And look at that warmth, all right, especially here. This is the most impressive subsurface El Nino signal that you will ever see, certainly in my lifetime and on record. All right. Some of these temperature anomalies down here at 100 to 150 meters deep are greater than 10 degrees Celsius. All right. Some of them have been spiking up above 15 degrees Celsius. That's wild. Well, this water all it's going to continue to do is surface. Maybe not to the magnitude that it is beneath the surface, but it still has to surface. That's all fuel to keep this El Nino cooking and also strengthening as we get deeper into this year and turn the calendar over to 27. Now, what's going on over here? What's all of this business? Well, for the past 2 years, all we've done was pool up warm water here in the Eastern Pacific or the Western Pacific. I'm sorry. All we've done is pool warm water up over here. But as we finished this winter and went into spring, tremendous westerly wind bursts that have still been ongoing and will continue to ongo did nothing but shove that warm water eastward. All right. So what has been replacing that is cooler water that's been upwelling from beneath the surface. You know what this is a harbinger of? That after we get this El Nino off our books here, that this cooler sea surface temperatures and subsurface temperatures are likely sowing the seeds for a La Nina event to appear later in 27 and as we get into 28. I'm less than excited about that, especially if you live in the west and southwest high plains. And you might ask yourself, well, why? I mean, this El Nino has sucked so far. What could La Nina hurt to do? Well, if we miss out on a weather pattern like an El Nino that traditionally favors us with at least better moisture, and we revert to a pattern like La Nina that we know oftentimes sucks for us in the west and the southwest high plains and the southwest United States, you know, that means the situation could go from bad to worse, all right, or worse to even more worse. These are the forecast models here. European seasonal model, right through February. Where do we peak this event out? Right here in November, December. All right. That's kind of where you're seeing the apex, especially, along that line in December. And then after that, we start to come down. But because this El Nino event is so strong that even by February, even on the lower member here of the model, takes us all the way down to 2 degrees C. That's still really a strong El Nino. All right. The mean is up here somewhere between 2 and 3 degrees C by February and possibly even March. But this thing is going to come down off that peak, is what I'm saying. Even the Bureau of Meteorology, which kind of brings that peak down a little less, still shows that peak November, December, and then we come off of that peak as we head into early this year, or early 27, I should say. All right, so both models still in agreement. What about the MEI? How well is this event coupled with the atmosphere? Well, all you need to know, the MEI started being recorded back in 1979. Where you're seeing the positive red numbers, that's where we're working with El Nino. The higher that positive red number, the more the atmosphere and the ocean are coupled, the more they're talking, the more they're working together. So when we look back at the event that happened in 82, 83, look at what happened here, all right? Started out in 82, weak La Nina, right there, rapidly collapsed, went to strong El Nino to finish, and that event technically didn't peak out in the MEI until March, April, and April, May of 83. And then it did nothing but rapidly collapse by August, September to weak La Nina conditions. So the all-time record for the MEI is that April, May of 1983, when that strong El Nino was going on. All right, let's see what happened in 87. 87 wasn't as strong of an El Nino event, but what happened after 87? Well, in 88, we collapsed it and we went into a fairly robust La Nina during the middle and back half of 1988. What about the 90s? Well, 96, 97. 96, we had a La Nina, collapsed that. 97, we came out of that La Nina, all right there, went rapidly to El Nino. In early 98, we maxed out the MEI there, March, April, and then look, by June, July, we were at a negative 1.5 in the MEI. Went right into La Nina. Coming out of that 97, 98 event, that's what we did. And we kept it in La Nina mode right through 99, too. Okay. So history, and I'm going to keep going with this, but history is already showing us that after we see a strong El Nino event, when it collapses, the atmosphere goes in the complete opposite direction most of the time, and we go into a significant La Nina event. In the 2000s here, okay, there really wasn't a strong El Nino or what we would say a strong La Nina, I suppose, here in 2008. All right, but we were just kind of in between. We didn't really see a strong event one way or another right there. Okay. But once we got to 2010, we did. 2010 saw weak El Nino conditions pop here. Right after that, La Nina. I really don't want to look at that event though. I want to look at 15 and 16 because 15 was a very strong El Nino event. Okay. And look what happened in 16. We collapsed that MEI and went to weak La Nina status, not only to finish 16, but look at this. This was some kind of a multi year weak La Nina type feel to the atmosphere after we came off of that 15-16 El Nino. 2023, we started out weak La Nina, very similar to what we did this year here. Got that out of the way, went to El Nino status technically with the MEI. All right, the sea surface temperature anomalies that existed with 23 and early 24 were a lot stronger than what the MEI did. All right, but this El Nino event that's ongoing, our MEI is already at 2.4. All right. Remember, 2.9 is the record. We're already at 2.4, indicating that strong El Nino. This has been such a rapid change. All right. We went right out of La Nina and steamed into El Nino. And this MEI number is probably only going to get stronger as we finish this year. All right. The latest model analog, this was in July. The August update hasn't come out. And I don't know if they're going to publish one or not. But these red bars indicate El Nino probabilities. The blue bars, La Nina probabilities. The gray bars, neutral. All right. Here we are, July, August, September 26. So we've got El Nino, El Nino, El Nino. Then it comes off. Look at the collapse that the model is showing, okay, of that El Nino. Meanwhile, look at the rapid ascension here of La Nina probabilities. Where they cross is right here in the May, June, July, August timeframe of 2027. So history shows us what happens after El Nino collapses, and the modeling is already on top of it. For this type of a signal to be showing up right now, and the strength of the signal for those La Nina probabilities to be flexing like that, that's a pretty strong indicator of where we're headed in the back part of 27 and as we go into 28. And you might say, well, what's the crossover going to be? Are we going to have any neutrality in this pattern? Or are we just going to go right out of El Nino to La Nina? Well, the model would say that's probably what we're going to do. Maybe we get a 3-month period there or so that's close to neutral. But the model and history shows that when we come off a really strong El Nino, we a lot of times go right in to a really strong La Nina. I don't have any reason to argue with it right now. With that in mind, let's look at the European seasonal model. It's upper level weather pattern forecast September to February. So for September, what we've got going on here, all right, no huge dominant ridge. The core of that ridge kind of repositions itself down here across southeast Texas and the northern Gulf. And then we've got this going on. Some southwesterly flow coming on up here, probably some monsoonal moisture wrapping around like that. All right, that's the pattern. October, pattern is somewhat flat, but notice here, we've got some ridging taking place here. The seeds, again, are being sown for what will inevitably be strong low pressure out here in the Gulf of Alaska and North Pacific. Farther south, we're probably starting to rip that subtropical jet across the southern tier here as well. November, there's the upper low that I was talking about. So what this does, all right, and down here, your subtropical jet stream resides. But what we do here is we flood not only the US, but Canada with mild Pacific air with this configuration. And where you're seeing that ridge right there, okay, that's downstream from where this low is. That will mean a lot warmer than average conditions across pretty much all of Canada, certainly the northern US, and probably most of the United States as we move through November. And I would also watch for some high latitude blocking, which is going to show up here too, up around Greenland. And it shows up there in December. We double down on the pattern here. subtropical jet ripping through here. And then up here, we get upper level high pressure that's going to provide for some blocking. So with this configuration, it is going to be really hard to get any sustained cold air to come down from the north like that. I think any cool anomalies that you're going to see temperature wise are simply just going to be due to more clouds, more precipitation, whether that be rain or snow or whatever. You'll see that show up. January, same story. All right, same story here. Blocked pattern. When this pattern gets set, it's going to last. In February, we are continuing it. Okay. So, what does that mean for the temperature anomalies here, September to February? Well, in September, we get that monsoonal pop, so we kind of relax some of the heat here in the Southwest, but we're still warmer than average here, lower to mid Mississippi Valley, and also up here in the Western Montana and the Pacific Northwest. October, this cool anomaly right here might be due to some, again, moisture, precipitation. November, we're cooler here because we're ripping the subtropical jet farther south. We're blowtorching here for the reasons that I just talked about. December, same story. Blowtorch continues here. January, some of that expands northward. Why is that? Okay, why are we seeing this exceptional cool anomaly in southeast Colorado, southwest Kansas, here in the panhandles? Is that the model having picked up on a big snow event that laid down a bunch of snow and is going to keep it cooler than average right there? Or is it more along the lines of just frequent snow events? I'm not sure right now, but it's certainly piqued my interest. Meanwhile, over the top, we are still warmer than average. February, same story. Look at that, it's still there. Pretty unusual to see that, but with an El Nino in the books right now and going to be continuing, not out of the realm of possibility. My one question here is how far south is that subtropical jet going to be? Is it going to be along the southern tier, very southern tier of the country, or is it going to set up a little farther north? I don't know yet. But when we look at the precipitation anomaly forecast, you see September. Obviously, I showed you what the European extended was showing you a little bit ago. The European seasonal model is all about that. Okay. October, we are still wetter than average back here through parts of the Four Corners, the plains, and points eastward. Drier northwest. November, we see the wettest conditions doing something along that line. Maybe a little pop here. December, California lights up. And we're doing this. Look at the dryness starting to show up here. Okay. Am I worried about the Northern Rockies into the Central Rockies snowpack with this? Yes, I am. Made no mistake about that from what I've been saying. January, do you see the little wetter than average that shows up here? Again, frequent snow events or one big one? Hard to say, but California is still loading up and we're still loading up here across the East Coast. Meanwhile, we're continuing with that kind of dry signal down the spine of the Northern and Central Rockies here. And I wouldn't be surprised, okay, to see that dryness be expanded out to something like this. All right, I'll talk more about that in a second. But even into February, we continue with that, okay, here and here and here. What about the NMME model, September to April? These are the temperature anomalies, the biggest heat anomalies northwest in September, October, November. Notice the white showing up. This is where our active storm track will be. December, watch this cool anomaly grow. Big warm anomaly here, big cool anomaly growing here. Look at that. That's January. So again, January to me, all right, if our weather pattern is bringing all this mild air like this, our opportunities to bring cold air south are not going to be great. So to me, this indicates active storminess here in the middle part of the country, not cold air coming down from Canada and the North Pole. And February, we even expand it. March and April, it relaxes a little bit. You're in the believe it when I see it camp, right? Me too. When's the last time we had that kind of setup where we saw that type of cool air? Whether that's over snowpack or just active repeated storms coming through. It's been a while, right? So you got that normalcy bias where you're like, I haven't seen it in a while, so it can't happen. Well, let me tell you something. It can happen. History shows it can happen. And in my opinion, if it's ever going to happen, it's got to happen with an El Nino event where we have that loaded up southern branch subtropical jet stream. Look at the precipitation anomalies. Very similar to the arrow here for September. October, November, see it goes a little farther south, okay? But we're still bringing a little bit of that farther north. The dryness, in my mind, is here. December, January, like I said, I thought that that dry signal could be expanded, though, remember? Okay? But the NMME certainly has us wet farther south. February, March. When's the last time we had a big March here in the middle part of the country? All we've had is two pathetic Marches. March of 25, March of 24. Both sucked. Okay. When's the last time? You might be saying, well, what's El Nino doing? I already showed you what El Nino is going to be doing in March of 27. It's still going to be here and it's still going to have some teeth to it. So could that be responsible for bringing that active jet stream in here like this? What about April? Do you see how we start to dry things out here where we weren't dry and we bullseye here? Again, I'll believe it when I see it, but this is what the model's printing out. Does it make some sense scientifically? I suppose, because the El Nino is still present, but we got a long ways to go before I'm excited about this. I'll tell you that right now. What about the Copernicus 3 temperature and anomaly forecast? September to January, this is where your biggest warm anomaly is centered, up here to the northwest and also down here, farther south and southeast. October, we start to see that heat go away. November, again, indicative of that active southern branch. Look at the heat building up here. I shouldn't say heat, just warmer than average. Very typical of an El Nino to get big blocking high up here, flood things with mild Pacific air, and that pattern doesn't change a whole lot. December, you see it continue, and January even more so. What about precipitation? Well, September, very similar, just like the Euro and the NMME, all right? Big subtropical plume over the western U.S., better moisture. Watch the dry pockets up here, though. October, November, do you see it? Do you see it coming south? There's your storm track. December, even more so. All right, this comes down into, from Canada across all of Montana, western North Dakota, western South Dakota, Wyoming. Some of this maybe even noses down here into western Nebraska, northeast Colorado. We'll have to see. But there is your most active core of your storm track. And January, same story. Okay. We're still doing storminess here. All right. But certainly there's your line of demarcation to where you go from what the model is saying is okay or even wetter than average to quite a bit drier than average up here across south central Canada and certainly the northern Rockies. What about the IRI? This got it updated last month. We're going to get another update on this here in a few days. But the IRI looks like this for September, October, November. Again, somewhat similar to the models I've showed you. October, November, December. Look at these probabilities. 60 to 70% plus of above average precipitation along that sector. Look at that little bit of blue there in northwest Kansas. You're laughing about it, right? You're laughing at it. Yeah, I get it. November, December, January. Southern branch, drier up here. Potential failure modes for this event. What about the AQM for December to March? What's up with that? Well, we are in El Nino, and this top 3 blocks here we're in El Nino. Now, if El Nino coincides with a cold AQM, look at the dry anomalies that show up where there were supposed to be wet. Okay, especially here. That wouldn't be any good, right? Meanwhile, over here where the AQM is neutral or warm, this is the more typical El Nino pattern that you would see. Okay, certainly drier over the top like that. So is the AQM going to be a factor? First of all, is the AQM going to be cold during that period of time? I don't think so. I think this El Nino is strong enough, and we're probably going to see it just overwhelm whatever signal the AQM provides for us. But it bears watching for this reason, because if for whatever reason we go into a cold AQM, it may mess a little bit with that traditional El Nino flavor. All right. Back in 2015, in 2016, California and the Southwest did not see a wet winter. They struck out. Okay. Missed it. We really need this stuff to happen. All right. Really do. Because when we go to La Nina, back to down here, these three bottom ones are La Nina. Look what happens whether the La Nina coincides with a cold AQM or a neutral or a warm. It's terrible through Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas, and on up here into the Western and Central Plains. It's not good. We have some time here to make some repairs, and we really need to do so. I've said this a little bit ago that in my opinion, we've got about 8 to 10 months to make this work. If we don't, we're in trouble. And you might say, well, we're already in trouble. No, you know what? We're not in as bad a trouble as we could be. It can always get worse. History shows that it's gotten worse. We need to be prepared for at least that alternative if this thing fails. The other thing that gets a lot of run, all right, depending on who you subscribe to or who you watch or whatever, is the current phase of the PDO going to offset what this El Nino does too? All right. So let's look at it. This is the PDO. I show this to you on a regular basis. And so I'm just going to revisit it for you. These are the PDO phases since 1850. Red, positive, warm PDO, blue, negative, cold PDO. All right. That's all the way back through. And immediately I know what you're looking at. You're going, oh, let's go to the 1930s. Well, you know what? Really, from about, say, 1920 here, okay, right through there, the late 19 teens, right through about 1945, the PDO largely was warm. Now we had a negative PDO phase right there in the heart of the Dust Bowl years, all right, from 32 to about 35, all right. But most of that time was characterized by a warm PDO. But from 48, okay, 48 to 76, it was largely negative. There were a couple pops in there, all right, but the drought of the major drought of the 50s, right there. Look at all that negative PDO. And you can come over here from 76, okay, from 76 to 98, right there to right there, all was warm PDO. You've heard me say this all the time. I refer to the 90s as the golden age of agriculture in the Western High Plains because it was. Okay. We didn't have much drought to worry about. And then 98 until present, this is all we've done. August of 98 to present. We popped a little bit of positive PDO off and on through here. Okay. But since that time, we've only had one major time where the PDO was positive. And that's when we dealt with the big El Nino back in 15 and 16. But since then, remember, we had an El Nino in 23. None of the such. We did not even sniff neutral or positive PDO territory. And for the January to December, all right, from 98 through 25, when you look at what's gone on with average precipitation anomalies through when you average all this out, look at who has been problematic. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Northwest Missouri, even on up here in some parts of the Missouri Valley. The West Coast has been a problem. The Southwest, all right? Negative PDO, not good in the plains, especially the farther west and south you go. January of 2020 to July of 2026. This is where we sit in terms of what the PDO has done. What has the precipitation anomalies done? January to December 2020 through 2025, look at these anomalies. The only areas that have consistently done better are these areas here, largely because we had hurricanes come up from the south. All right. Look at these anomalies in South and West Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa. Look at what Iowa's been doing. They've been running huge yearly precipitation deficits during that period of time. Okay. What have we been doing with corn? Record crops, right? This year, coming off that record we had last year, but it's still on the table to do 180 bushel, right? Would only be the second 180 bushel average ever. Okay. So what's that tell you? Yeah, you think they might be doing something good with genetics in the crops? Absolutely. If you can do what we've been doing and not have the water that we've had, something is working for you. It's not the weather per se, it's those genetics being able to be better at what they're doing. Okay. Analog years with strong El Nino and a negative cold PDO. We don't have many of them. 72 and 73. So these are the precipitation anomalies that showed up from September, okay? September through November of 72. Again, big monsoonal moisture here to finish and start, okay? And most areas were okay, all right? Most areas did all right with moisture during that time. These areas up here, okay, didn't do very well. The Southeast, interestingly enough, and down here in South Texas didn't, okay? They didn't do very well. In fact, very dry in Florida during that period of time. What about December through February? Well, we were wetter here in the middle, okay, right there. Drier up in Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, even north central New Mexico was dry. And we were actually dry through this corridor. So it wasn't excessively wet, at least for that 3 month period, but for most areas. But you look who benefited out of that. It was situated farther out here. Even down here in West Texas, the 34th or 44th wettest period. Southwest Texas, the 17th. All right. Pretty interesting. What about 2023? 2023, at least as far as the MEI goes, is not nearly as strong as the event that we've got going on. But September through November of 23, look at this. The Southwest missed out on late monsoon completely. We were actually wetter through this sector. Okay. Look where we were drier. Out here in parts of the Corn Belt, very dry finish to the growing season. But December through February changed that narrative in a big way through the middle part of the country. Okay. Look at that. A lot wetter there. Farther south and certainly up the eastern seaboard, wetter too. Pacific Northwest, though, that bucks the trend, right? Usually these areas up here are drier. Look at that. Not so much. So to me, again, that was an atypical behavior for an El Nino, but that also indicates to me that the atmosphere and the ocean weren't necessarily working together as well as they can, or as locked in as what they are right now. What about analog years with a strong El Nino and a positive or warm PDO? Well, the one that jumps really out there, okay, 82, 83. Look at the West here from September through November. During that period of time, we were still dry here, okay? What about December through February? We changed things. Got a lot wetter in the middle part of the country. This is a lot more typical. All right, dry there in Montana, parts of the Dakotas. Look at that. Central and north central South Dakota. That was the driest December through January period in that 134-year period. Okay, pretty wild. But there were a lot of areas that were wetter than average and few areas that were dry. 97, September through November. Same story here. Still a little dry here, slower to recover, at least initially. Drier up here, and also drier through parts of the Midwest and Eastern Corn Belt. But as we flip the script into December through February, look at that. This is a lot more classical as far as that subtropical jet goes. All right. Much wetter farther south, and either side of that storm track, we did okay. But we were really dry through this area, South Dakota, Nebraska, even north central Colorado, and certainly up here across Montana. But everybody else farther south did better. 2015. This was the fall of 15 and the winter, December through January. This is what failed, right? Usually does not happen this way where you were dry during a powerful El Nino here and you were wetter north, all right? But do I think this is a 15-16 clone? No, I don't. I really don't. This event is much more east biased than this and much more, going to be continue to be much more coupled to the atmosphere during that period of time. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of work to be done here. All right. There's a lot of work to be done by the weather. There's a lot of work to be done by me or any meteorologist for that matter. Okay. As we go through this is not information you look at today and then don't look at again for 6 months because the situation's going to change. Every El Nino is different. Every La Nina is different. They both have different nuances. We have to pay attention to those nuances along the way because that can give us a better tell about how the pattern is going to set up and what the pattern is going to produce. So, as I said, look, man, I know everybody's pissed at the weather and pissed at the weather guy, whatever. Totally understand it. But we need to regroup here. We need to regroup, pay attention, and be prepared going forward. Because one thing's for sure, there are going to be extremes with this pattern as we wrap up 26 and as we go into 27. The event is too strong, it's too locked into the atmosphere, and it's going to be something to see what it produces. From a modeling standpoint, you got to take it with a grain of salt right now. You can see what the models are putting out, but have the seasonal models been good lately? No. They've been horseshit. Okay. But they are going to continue to project what they are because they're all locked in to this strong El Nino. So, best piece of advice I can give you is check in frequently. All right. Hit me up. You know how to do so. I just gave my contact information. If there's something I can do for you to walk you through this, if there's something additional that I can do to help you be prepared. And you might say, well, prepared for what? That's the thing, right? Because we have to be prepared for both sides of the coin because a lot of us are dealing with the bad stuff right now and not the good stuff gracing us with moisture. So that's my take for you today. Probably a lot longer, a lot more information than a lot of you would want, but I believe in giving you that information. I believe in talking about it. And if nothing else, starting a conversation that we can further. So, folks, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for your continued listener and viewership to the Desert Farmer Podcast. Be well.